Boring urbanist videos. I think it's time for something a little different. So I went outside for some inspiration.
Yeah, I thought they're crazy.
Then I saw something on the streetcar and knew what I had to do.
Man, what the hell is BTC Turk?
Yeah, I went to Turkey. You know, you gotta treat yourself sometimes. I stayed in Istanbul for several days, and these were my thoughts about it. I stayed in Beyoğlu, close to all the touristy spots on the European side. Man, was it hilly as hell, dude. Get ready to use your legs because you'll be walking up and down stairs here. Walkability is a hot topic, but honestly, where does this fall? It's in a dense neighborhood with plenty of spaces within walking distance, but the hilly terrain makes it gnarly to walk. If you're not paying attention, you might trip on a hidden stair, or a ramp on the sidewalk, or a lumpy bollard thing on the ground. Also, forget about wheelchair accessibility here because it's not possible with these hills. The reward for walking up and down these hilly streets is that once you're at the top, you get a nice view of the Bosphorus. Maybe you'll see a dolphin if you zoom in enough. They have a ton of stray cats here, and they're chilling everywhere, and the locals look out for them by putting out small trays of food and water and building small homes for them. Somehow, despite all of these stray cats, there's still less animal poop on the sidewalks here than what we have in American cities. The city is full of history and plenty of historical mosques and palaces to visit. Of course, you'll have to pay the tourist price for some of the historical places that charge admission. I think you're not supposed to film inside some of these places too. Oops. I saw some Russian ladies get pressed by security inside the Dolmabahce Palace for filming. These historic sites are cool and all, but after seeing 3 circumcision rooms, it was time for a change of scenery. Good thing there's a tram nearby. The touristy areas are pretty well served by transit. The T1 tram runs at grade with high frequencies, usually every 2 to 5 minutes, and it connects to a bunch of popular destinations and to transfer points to other modes of transit. You can go from the Dolmabahce Palace down to Topkapi Palace, Hagia Sophia, and the Blue Mosque all in this one tram line. Nearby destinations include various bazaars like the Grand Bazaar and Spice Bazaar. Transit here is widely used and you can get packed in cheek to cheek during busy times.
What are you saying?
There's like cheek-to-cheek contact right now.
The transit cards are kinda cool and have different designs on them. You can also transfer to a ferry to head over to Kadıköy on the Asia side and walk around the pedestrianized streets. Maybe you get shit-faced on some Rocky with some Fenerbahce fans. Or to check out some of the graffiti they have on the walls. The tram also has transfers to funiculars, which are like elevator trams that ride up and down inclines at an angle, so you can skip the hike up the big ass hill to Taksim Square. Taksim Square is an open pedestrianized plaza, and you can walk towards Istiklal Avenue, a popular pedestrianized street. It also has its own tram that goes back and forth on the street. The area has plenty of food options too. An iconic street food is doner kebab. They have multiple storefronts in the area slinging doner right by Taksim Square, all basically selling the same stuff. Do not come here expecting the saucy and dressed up doner that you would get in Europe. The authentic Turkish style is just bread with greased up sliced meat and onions. And if you're lucky, it might come with pickles and tomatoes. It was recommended that we try the wet burger, which is a plain hamburger that appears to have been dipped in a loose tomato sauce. And it tasted exactly like that. A hamburger dipped in tomato sauce. It was probably one of the better street foods here, not gonna lie, and for a couple bucks, it's not that bad. What was actually the worst was the corn. They have these vendors slinging roasted corn and chestnuts out by the palaces and parks. A bunch of tourists were digging into them, but don't fall for this trap. The corn sucks. Look at all of this abandoned corn. For the same price as a wet burger, you can get the driest livestock feed ever, seasoned with industrial-grade glyphosate and salt. The chestnuts were also dry as hell. I'd also be careful around some of the ice cream vendors too. The street food was kind of a flop here, but maybe it's because we were tourists. But they do have good food here as well. The breakfasts here were solid. They have meze with a variety of foods that you can pick out and eat with bread. It's all fresh and delicious and tasty with menemen, a tomato and egg dish. Being so close to the water, the city has good fish to eat too. They serve it up grilled with some things to garnish, and of course some bread. Meat and bread is basically the specialty here. There's every variation of these two things that you can think of. You have pide, lahmacun, and of course kebabs. Just about everywhere you can get kebabs. And the kebabs include everything from beef, lamb, chicken, eggplant, and even this. Testi kebab is from Cappadocia, so you should go there and try it. But it's worth mentioning, it's meat cooked and stewed inside of a clay pot and cracked open to serve. Occasionally you'll get a side of pyrotechnics with your meal. There were also many places to buy merchandise, with many different bazaars with stores located inside and outside. The Grand Bazaar was packed with people with vendors lining the halls, and it was hotboxed by people smoking cigarettes indoors. There's a bunch of stuff for sale there, but expect to pay a tourist tax on the purchases. Try not to buy here if you're looking for a good deal. The other less popular markets tend to be more fairly priced, with more room to negotiate, especially if you're coming through with big buys. Hitting up all these places is convenient with transit and walking, but there were a ton of taxis roaming around the city. Uber and Lyft as we know it in the US isn't really a thing here, so expect a taxi whenever you use a rideshare app. Rides here can be a mixed bag depending on who you get as your taxi driver. So I would stick with transit because it's reliably less of a ripoff, but you do need to pay for every transfer. Getting around by foot is easy in popular destinations, but sometimes it gets a little busy. The sidewalks get filled up and sometimes foot traffic spills into the streets. The residential areas near the historic center are built up to a mid-rise height and densely packed together with amenities like stores and restaurants sprinkled throughout the area. The streets and sidewalks here can be narrow because this area has been inhabited and built up throughout multiple empires in the city's long history, centuries before the car was invented. Because of this, cars clog up the streets and people have to negotiate space when walking and driving. It ends up being fine as long as you are aware, but some taxi drivers do not play around though. There are other growing pains too. Gentrification is happening in some neighborhoods near popular destinations, where it's more profitable to create rentals for expats and tourists than for local residents. This is not unique to Istanbul. Popular cities around the world all face their own battle with increasing cost of living and displacement. It's hard to ignore the effects that tourism has on a city with as many visitors as Istanbul. In fact, it was the most visited city by international travel this past year. It's a tough problem to solve, with every fast-growing city facing similar struggles. Often, it seems like political leadership is uninterested in enacting policies that favor people over capital. Despite all of that, Istanbul is a beautiful city with centuries of history and culture. There are endless things to see and enjoy, and I'm glad I had a chance to check some of it out during my stay.
Istanbul.
But I have one last question to ask. Why is there so much Frida Kahlo merch everywhere?
Daydream, my heart is to the skyline. I relish in the silence. A world behind my eyes. Daydream, I sit back on my heels. I let go of my feelings. I wanna get down for you. Won't you lay it down slowly in my head? Cancel all the bullshit.
Dang. This guy's tweaking.